in engineering physics, we are discussing mechanics. And in mechanics also, in the last session, we just tried to understand something what is important known as central force. Now, in the current session, we shall see and try to understand the nature of central forces. The central force is basically a conservative force. What does conservative force mean? Conservative force means the negative gradient of a scalar potential. That means central force is a conservative force, and any conservative force is the negative gradient of scalar potential. So therefore central force is the negative gradient of scalar potential. Now we shall see whether it can be negative gradient of scalar potential or not. For that we are considering a force F acting on a particle. So this force acting on the particle is a conservative force. Therefore the curl of the force should be 0, which we can represent like this. So the force on a particle is conservative, means the curl of the force should be 0. Curl is represented by the symbol del. So del cross F is equal to 0. So you need to recollect the background of Maxwell's equations to understand the curl and divergence. So del cross F equal to 0. That is, the force F acting on the particle is a conservative force only when the curl of the force is 0. That is, del cross F equal to 0, let it be 1. Equation 1. Now when you take the potential as V, it is a scalar function of the coordinates of the particle. So if V is taken as a scalar potential function, then scalar function of coordinates of the particle means del cross minus of delta V is 0. This is the second equation. So from these two equations, we can say F is equal to minus delta V. F is equal to minus delta V. So that is, the force acting on the particle is a conservative force when it is given by the gradient of a scalar function V. This is the gradient of a scalar function V. This scalar function is what is called potential energy of the particle. This scalar function is what is known as potential energy of the particle. Let us suppose a particle is being moved from a position A to a B to another position B, separating a distance of dr. That means you are applying a force. From A to B, you are trying to move this. Some work is to be done. So when the force is acting on the particle, it displaces it from a position to another position. Then how do you represent the work done by it? This is how you can represent the work done by it. Because the force is displacing the particle from one position A to another position B, work done be calculated as W is equal to integral A to B of F dot dr, where this F is a conservative force. F already we got it as minus delta V. Therefore, substituting F is equal to minus delta V in this expression of work done, what we will get as W is equal to integral A to B of minus delta V dr. Right? What is delta V? Delta V is nothing but, in unit vector terminology, we can give its components as dou V by dou x into I plus dou V by dou z into k plus dou V by dou y into k, like that. In terms of coordinates, Cartesian coordinate systems, by taking the coordinates as unit vectors I, j, k, delta V can be represented like this. Delta V can be I cap into dou V by dou x plus j cap into dou V by dou y plus k cap into dou y by dou z. And also this dr, displacement, this also is a three-dimensional one. So this you can represent again in Cartesian coordinates as I into dx plus j into dy plus k into dz. So this delta V can be represented like this, and this dr can be represented like I dx plus j dy plus k dz. Substituting these two values in this integral, what we will get, we shall see. Therefore, what is delta V dot delta R we can write like this. That is dou V by dou X into dx plus dou V by dou Y into dy plus dou V by dou Z into dz. So this is the value of delta V dot delta R. So that when we substitute here, entire differentiation and integration vanishes. So you will be left with integral dV only. So integral dV means V. As a definite integral between the limits a to b, if you substitute, you will arrive at VA minus VB. That means it is coming as a potential difference if V is a potential function. So any work that is done can depend only on the value of the potential function V at the initial and final positions, but it is independent of the path joining the both. Thus, a force F acting on a particle is conservative. When the work done in taking the particle from one point to the other, it can depend only on the initial and final positions, but it is independent of the actual path. This is how the nature of central force as a conservative force can be understood. Having understood the nature of the conservative force, let us show how this conservative force can be equivalent to the negative gradient of the potential energy. So this is now we are going to show. When the force is conservative force, according to potential energy is generally represented by the alphabet U. So potential energy is nothing but work done. Force is F, displacement is ds, let us say, or dr. But W is equal to F into S, that is F into dr. So work is nothing but energy. In this case, energy is potential energy. Therefore, U will be integral F dot S, that is between the limits R to infinity. R is the distance, infinity is the ultimate limit. So therefore, if F is a conservative force means, as per the definition of potential energy, which is represented as U, U can be defined as integral R to infinity of F dot dr. Okay. So, of course, in terms of components you can write, because it is a conservative force, it is to be minus F dr. So, U is equal to minus of R to infinity, integral R to infinity of F dr. Now, when F is conservative, now we will express this force F and the term R. Integral dr means R only, na? This F and R in terms of their components along x, y, z. If you want to represent in a three-dimensional space, you need to bring the Cartesian coordinates of I, j, k. So F will have x component, y component and z component. Similarly, R will have x component, y component and z component. Like F is equal to Fxi plus Fyj plus Fzk. Similarly, R means dr or R is dxi plus dyj plus dzk. Like that we have to refer. But prior to that, what is the basis for referring like that? If the potential energy of particle at a point R is to be measured, the potential energy is nothing but the amount of work done in moving that particle from that point to infinity. And that what we are implementing, U is equal to minus integral R to infinity of F dot dr. Minus indicates it is working against the friction in the opposite direction. That's what it means. Now in this, the term F and R are represented in terms of coordinates as like this. F is represented as Fxi plus Fjk, Fyj plus Fzk. And R means what? What is R in three-dimensional coordinate system? R is nothing but xi plus yj plus zk. Now small component when you take, dr will become idx plus jdy plus kdz. So these two values, we will put it in the integral and see what happens. So therefore, U will become something like this. U is equal to integral minus, anyway it comes, integral r to infinity of f dot dr. F is fxi plus fyj plus fzk dot idx plus jdy plus kdz. Okay. Now you have differential values in integral, so they get negated automatically. So you will be left with dot product. No? So when it's a dot product, you will have I dot I, j dot j, k dot k, etc. etc. So using that vector cross multiplication, you will be left with potential energy being equal to integral r infinity to r fx dx plus fy dy plus fz rz. Fx dx plus fy dy plus fz dz. This is the ultimate value. Now we can do partial differentiation with respect to xyz coordinates as fx minus dou u by dou x, fy minus dou u by dou y, fz minus dou u by dou z. So from this, f can be found as fxi plus fyj plus fzk. How do we represent that? So you can represent that as f as fxi plus fyj plus fzk. That means minus of dou u by dou x into I plus dou u by dou yz into j plus dou u by dou z into k, when minus is taken as common. Now this is nothing but gradient only. Na? So gradient of, that is dou by dou x of I plus dou by dou y of j plus dou by dou z of k is nothing but gradient. So therefore this is a gradient of u. What is u? Potential function only. Therefore this is represented as minus gradient of u, that is nothing but minus del u. So therefore we have proved that the conservative force is equal to the negative gradient of potential energy u. So when instead of 3 dimensions, if you restrict yourself to only 1 dimensional, then you have F is equal to minus dou u by dou x only, showing that conservative force is a negative of the space rate change of potential energy. Thus through this we have proved that the conservative force is equal to the negative gradient of the potential energy. So when instead of 3 dimensions, if we restrict ourselves to only 1 dimension, then only we have is F is equal to minus du by dx, showing that conservative force is a negative of the space rate change of the potential energy. Similarly, we can prove the curl of a conservative force also. So that also will be 0. That means the existence of a potential function u such that F is equal to minus grad u. So it follows that curl F equal to 0 is necessary and sufficient condition or a conservative field of force F. So that part is anyway not there for you. So we can as well calculate the curl of a conservative force also. Now with this background, we shall now try to focus our understanding on finding the angular momentum, conservation of angular momentum of a particle in central force. Angular momentum, number of times it is coming, you might have observed. Now angular momentum conservation in the case of a particle undergoing central force. What the statement says, angular momentum of a particle under a central force is always constant, and therefore it is a constant of motion in accordance to the law of conservation of angular momentum. That means, in other words, central force field and its angular momentum of a particle can be conserved. For that, on a 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional axis, consider a particle of reduced mass and it is moving about an origin. The force acting in the particle is a central force. It is given by O is the origin. Particle with reduced mass. Force acting on that is a central force. Therefore, what is the force acting on the particle? F. Central force particle F is given by like this. F is equal to F of r dot r cap, where r, this is the position vector. This Vector r is a position vector. This r cap is a unit vector along the direction of r. So naturally, a torque is acting on the particle subjected to the central force. That will be 0. So torque acting on the particle subjected to central force is 0. This is what I mean beings. That means this, of course, this is an arc, one of the paths of circular motion. So the torque acting on the particle subjected to a central force is 0. Then what happens? By definition, earlier we have seen torque is defined as a vector product of R and F, where F is the force acting on the particle and vector R is the vector distance from the origin. This is a cross product. So cross product means what? You can write like this. This is nothing but R. Vector R is represented as magnitude of R into direction. What is a vector? After all, a vector is a product of its magnitude and direction. Unit vector gives you the direction, modulus gives you the magnitude. And what is this F? F is nothing but a central force equation. Okay, you can just readjust that like this. You can write it as magnitude R into Fr into R cross R, R cap cross R cap you can write, like I cross. So when R cross cap, R cap means unit vectors. In unit vector terminology, this is I cross I. They are parallel vectors. Then opposite, automatically the angle between them is 0. Therefore sin theta is 0. Sin 0 is 0. Therefore this will become 0. Therefore the whole thing will become 0. That means entire torque, because R cross R is 0, torque will be 0. What is torque? Torque or toe is the time rate of change of angular momentum. Since toe equal to d by dt of P or J. P earlier we used to write for normal angular momentum. It is in the case of central force, we will write the angular momentum as J. Without central force, it is represented as P bar. With central force, angular momentum is represented as J bar. So since torque is the time rate of change of angular momentum, in central forces environment, it will be represented as tau is equal to d by dt of J. Tau equal to 0 means d by dt of J equal to 0. Is it not? D by dt of J equal to 0 means dJ equal to 0. That means J is a constant. That means what we have proved? Angular momentum of a particle in a central force, which is under a central force, is always remaining constant. That is, it moves with a constant motion as per the law of conservation of angular momentum. In other words, central force field and its angular momentum of a particle can be conserved. This is what we need to understand from this. Now let us look at some examples of conservation of angular momentum when the particle is under central forces. One is the most popular one, what is known as skating. The other one is motion of planets in orbitals. Suppose if you take the popular example of skating, it involves beginning the spin with one's arms extended, then moving the arms closer to the body in skating. This motion will result in the increase of speed with which any skater can rotate, his rotation get increases. This is the case for using for conservation law. Suppose if the skater's arms are extended, the moment of inertia of the skater is greater than when the arms are close to the body, because somehow the scatter's mass decreases and radius of rotation also decreases. So when we consider the scatter as an isolated body or an isolated system with no net external torque acting, if the moment of the inertia of the scatter decreases, then angular velocity also increases. I am repeating. One of the examples of conservation of angular momentum is skating. Suppose when the scatter's arms are extended, the moment of inertia of the scatter is greater than what? When the arms are close to the body, because some of the scatter's mass decreases and also radius of rotation decreases. But when we consider the scatter as an isolated system with no net external torque acting, if the moment of inertia of the scatter decreases, automatically the angular velocity increases. So that is one of the examples of conservation of angular momentum. Similarly, if you look at the other example, which is noted as planets in orbitals. So let us look at the motion of planets in its orbitals. We all know that the planets move in elliptical orbits around the sun, with sun at the foci. Sun at the center and all other planets are revolving around that. That is what is known to us. That is what we generally say, planets are moving in elliptical orbits around the sun with sun at one of the foci. Now a gravitational force on the planet is acting in a direction towards the center of the sun. Therefore, the force is a central force. Because of this force, the angular momentum of the planet will be constant. This is what we have to understand. Again, I am repeating. The planets are moving in elliptical orbits around the sun, with sun is at the one of the foci. Now, a gravitational force on the planet is acting in a direction toward the center of the sun. Thus, the force is becoming a central force. Because of this reason, the angular momentum of the planet will be constant. Next thing we have to understand is an important component, what is known as rigid body. So especially this is very crucial from the angle of central forces. Now, what is a rigid body? Rigid body definition says something else. But before going to the definition, let us understand the situation. We can say it is an idealization of a solid body of a very finite size which is neglected. In other words, the distance between any two given points of a rigid body, they remain always constant in time, regardless of the external forces extended on them or acting on them. But practically having a rigid body in real life is very difficult. Even though such an object cannot physically exist due to relativity, objects can be normally assumed to be perfectly rigid if they are not moving near the speed of light. That means when a body is rotating at the speed of light, then only you can say it is a rigid body. But on ground, it's very difficult to achieve that. Therefore, having a perfect rigid body is highly impracticable. But still, for theoretical purposes, we assume that it is a rigid body. Normally, especially in classical mechanics, a rigid body is usually considered as a continuous mass distribution. Whereas in a rigid body, it is usually thought as a collection of point masses. For instance, quantum mechanics molecules consist of point masses like electrons and nuclei. They are often sometimes seen as rigid bodies. But when you look at the definition, the rigid body is one body which does not change its shape or size under the effect of forces acting over it. That means when you press it, when you apply some force on a body, if it doesn't change its shape or size, then it is called a rigid body. Now it is slightly different from elastic body. Remember this. In the case of elastic body, there is something called restoration. Here in rigid body case, there is no concept of restoration or getting back or gaining back the original shape or size once force put on the body is eliminated. Now in that context, it is different. Because in elastic body, you have something called deformation. In a rigid body, you don't have any concept of deformation. Because in elastic bodies, under the effect of forces, you can have deformation where the particle can change its original size or shape, and on removal of the force, it can get back its original shape and size. So the rigidity of a body depends on the fact that how far it undergoes deformation under the effect of forces acting on it. But in actual practice, no solid body is perfectly rigid, because every body cannot be changed its size and shape because of the force acting on it. So the deformation is very small, and therefore it can be considered as a rigid body. For example, beams, trusses, frames and other little structures, they have negligible deformation. Then in that case, they can be considered as rigid bodies. Sometimes a rigid body can be put under a constrained motion, because if you put some restrictions and if you impose on the individual particles of the system due to force, these are called constrained systems. These are not allowed to change their positions or velocities. The particles can be allowed to change their positions and velocities with the time. Such a material system is said to be free. There is something called translation motion. Translational motion means the motion by which a body shifts from one point to another point in space. For example, the motion of a bullet fired from a gun is an example for translation motion. In this, for any given time interval, if each particle of the body undergoes the same displacement in the same direction, then it is a translational motion. Another one is called a rotational motion. Rotational motion may be looking like this. It is a common factor in our daily life as a translational motion. For example, the wheels spinning top, the blades of a fan, the phonograph records, all are going to perform rotational motion. Then the body does not move from one place to another. It simply turns through a certain angle. Thus, the body is said to be performing a pure rotational motion if every particle in the body moves in a circular path such that the centers of these circles lie in a single line, which is what is known as axis of rotation. In our daily life, we find several examples where bodies describe translational and rotational motion simultaneously. Suppose if you take a pure rotational motion, the body does not move from one place to another. It simply turns through a certain angle. If you can put some restrictions, or if you can impose some restrictions on the individual particles of the system, then that is what is called constrained system. These are not allowed to change their positions and velocities. For example, if you take a car wheel, the wheel of a car rotates about its own axis as well as it covers certain linear distance also. Similarly, the earth rotates about an axis passing through it, and at the same time it revolves around the sun. Thus, earth has got both rotational and translational motions. But in more complicated examples and cases, the axis of rotation may change in direction with time. But however, we shall define only to simple cases of rotation of a rigid body about a fixed axis. Thus, we can conclude that when you talk about translational motion, the rigid body can perform pure translation motion when each of the particle of the body undergoes same displacement in the same direction in a given interval of time. Whereas when you talk about rotational motion, the rigid body performs pure rotational motion when each particle of the body moves in a circle and the center of all the circles lie in a straight line, which is called the axis of rotation. This is what you need to know about rigid body movement. So, in this session, we tried to understand the conservative nature of central forces and showing that the conservative force is equal to the negative gradient of potential energy. And also we tried to understand from the angle of central forces how the conservation of angular momentum takes place, how it can become a constant factor. And also we have seen some examples of conservation of angular momentum like the ones of skating and motion of planets in orbits. Then we tried to understand the concept of rigid body, its definition, and different types of motions without constraints and with constraints. In that also we looked at how translational motion can take place and how rotational motion can take place. What are the influences that constraints have got? How does it differ from elastic behavior? When do you call it as a rigid body? When do you call it as an elastic body? What is the level of deformation that can be caused to be defined as a rigid body? And the types of motions as rotational motion and translational motion. Based on this, just like in linear motion, that means when a body is moving in a straight line, you will have terms like simple kinematic terms like initial velocity, final velocity, displacement, acceleration. Based on that general kinematic equations you use it to get, is it not? Similarly, when we talk about rotational motion, Then you have rotational kinematics. Here also you will have angular displacement, angular velocity. In the case of normal straight line, it is linear velocity, linear displacement. Here in the case of rotational motion, we get rotational angular displacement, angular velocity, angular acceleration, etc. That is what is basically known as rotational kinematics. So we, just like in the lower classes, we have understood three equations. V equal to u plus at, s equal to ut plus half at square, v square minus u square equal to 2as. Those three fundamental equations of kinematics, they are related to straight line motion. Whereas when it comes to rigid body rotational motion, here you have rotational kinematics. So in the next session, we shall see something about rotational kinematic relations and how those equations, kinematic equations, change their representation when it comes to rotational kinematics. That is the agenda for the next session. Meanwhile, practice these things and get an idea about central forces as well as rigid body fundamentals.